Welcome back to Apolitical. I hope all is well. Thank you for tuning in another week. And thank you to our guest last week, Jason Allen, for coming in and talking to us about the Atlanta School Board. This week, we're going to be sitting down with Jason Dozier. Jason is an Army veteran running for City Council in District 4, and he's running against Cleto Winslow, who has held the seat for well over a decade. So I'm excited to talk to him. As usual, please make sure you are subscribed wherever you are listening, and also follow our network on social media. It's Atlanta Decoded on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So without further ado, coming right up is our interview with City Council candidate Jason Dozier. Stay tuned. All right, so we are here with Jason Dozier. Jason is running for City Council in District 4 this year. Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to come on Apolitical.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's start with your background. Who is Jason Dozier?
Well, I'm a new father. We adopted a baby girl last summer, so she just turned 1 year old, and so that's who I am right now, especially. But I've been a husband and homeowner in the Mechanicsville community since 2015. Before that, going way before that, I actually was born and raised here in Atlanta. I was born at what used to be Georgia Baptist Hospital, right off of Boulevard. I was raised by a single mother in DeKalb County in South DeKalb. Graduated from our public schools. Went to school in Ohio to be a teacher. After I got my teaching degree, after doing my first student teaching exercise, I realized that was not the career for me. My heart and my soul goes out to my educators. In fact, my wife is a former educator. I came back home, had what I like to call a crisis of purpose, worked in the warehouse for a year, and decided to raise my right hand and join the Army. I guess Army life was easier than teaching. But I joined at the height of the Iraq War and ended up deploying to both Iraq and Afghanistan as an officer. And so since 2012, I've been working at a nonprofit, working with military veterans, helping veterans and military spouses find good paying jobs across America. It's called Hire Heroes USA. And we have about 35,000 veterans and spouses come through our doors every year. And so that's been my profession for the last decade. But my community work has really driven me and has driven me to run for city council.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's go back to 2017. You ran against Cleto Winslow, the current longtime council person for District 4, and you narrowly lost in a runoff. What actually motivated you to take that step into politics? That was your first time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What inspired you to take that leap?
Yeah. So before all of this, before I decided to run for office, I was doing community organizing work in Mechanicsville after Turner Field got sold or before Turner Field got sold, but after the Braves left for Cobb County. They announced that they were selling Turner Field, parking lots around Turner Field at 68 acres. And I joined a community organization that was actually a coalition of about 45 community organizations, faith organizations, nonprofits, saying, hey, we want to speak with one voice, saying we want a community benefits agreement. We want a legally binding document that says the developer has to commit to making sure that we can guarantee jobs for people in our community. Unfortunately, after a year and a half of organizing work, we weren't successful, and unfortunately, City Hall, specifically City Council, specifically our incumbent council person, was a roadblock towards that endeavor. And so I felt that I wanted to work on behalf of the community to make sure that the community's voice was going to be heard. So I decided to run for city council back in 2017. And even though I had never run for office before, I had done political organizing work here in Georgia. I used to be the chief of staff of the Young Democrats of Georgia. I've done some work with candidates and campaigns across the state. And I wanted to make sure that our community was going to have a champion. And so that's why I ran in 2017. Just how that race turned out, I'm still just wowed by the support I got from the community. As a first-time candidate, taking on a then 24 incumbent. It's the first and only candidate to ever take her into a runoff and to only lose that election by just over 200 votes. Yeah. It's still humbling to think about that in those terms. And so just over the last 4 years, just thinking about places in which City Hall has failed and City Council has failed, I couldn't sit on the sidelines, and I wanted to make sure that, let people know that we came close last time, but, I'm back in this fight, and we're going to finish this fight, and so we're out here aggressively trying to make this change happen one way or the other.
So let's come back to your opponent, Councilwoman Winslow. She is in the race again this year. She's running for her 8th term. Next year will be her 28th year in the seat. That's a long time. Do you think there should be a term limit for council positions?
Yeah, I go back and forth. I definitely think term limits are more important at the local level. I'm not sure I support them like with national elections. I recognize what happens is when you have term limits for like Congress or for the Georgia state legislature, it puts the power in the hands of lobbyists. It puts the power in the hands of people who are not elected because you lose that institutional knowledge when you have that much changeover. For city races, I think that there's a happy medium. I like what we do for the mayor's race where you have a 2-term limit and then you have to take some time off. And if you run again, then more power to you. I know we've only had that happen once before. You have a current candidate who's trying to be the second person to ever do that.
Right.
I think that is a bit of a better way to go. If the voters want somebody to stay in office, there should be a way for that person to continue to serve in office. But so yeah, I think 2 terms should be more than enough to be able to enact the change that you're trying to do. I think that making sure that there is that people have to take some time, take a step back and maybe take some time off. I think it's probably the most optimal way to do it. I don't think that we should explicitly ban someone from ever running again for this seat ever in their life. The dynamics of the city changes from year to year, from decade to decade, and maybe the people might feel that I might be the best suited to take on a challenge 20 years from now.
Right.
I definitely don't see myself being in this seat for 20 years, but even if elected. But I do think that there's some folks who have been institutions in this city, institutions in the state, but there needs to be opportunities for people to continue to represent their constituents in a meaningful way. And so yeah, this is all to say, I don't think we have a flat ban, but I do think we need to modify how we do term limits to that.
Yeah. Okay. So going through your platform, I know that making the streets safer in District 4 is a huge issue for you. Can you tell us why and what your plan would be to do that?
Yeah, it's one of the things that I take personally because I've been hit by a car in the city of Atlanta. I've had to go to Grady, and thankfully I'm here to sit in front of you today. But a lot of our people in our city don't have that opportunity because especially when you look at where crash data shows where there are collisions with vehicles and pedestrians. This is in the black and brown and underserved parts of the city, communities without sidewalks, communities without crosswalks, communities where kids walk to school or bike to school, communities where seniors are trying to go to the store or trying to go to the park. That's where a lot of the crashes are happening, and it's black and brown communities that are suffering from that. In fact, in the last 5 years, more than 2,000 Atlantans have been injured or killed in a collision with a vehicle. And I want to make sure that our neighborhoods get sidewalks. I want to make sure that our neighborhoods get speed humps or speed tables to slow these cars down. The pandemic has only made speeding worse in the city. Traffic went down, and then people used that as an opportunity to treat our local roads as highways. And unfortunately, now that people are going back to work, that hasn't changed. And we've seen more drag racing in the city of Atlanta. We've seen an escalation of people doing donuts and things like that. Our streets have become dangerous, and I want to make sure we deliver and what really we promised to our communities decades ago.
Nice. So what about crime? There's a lot of discussion going on around the city about how the city should be handling this uptick in homicides. Where do you kind of stand on that?
Yeah, it is true. Atlanta has a higher rate of homicides than we've had in years past. I recognize the overall crime rate is lower because with the pandemic, especially property crimes have gone down. But homicides and aggravated assaults and things like that have gone up. In fact, I had a young man killed right in front of my house last year. It took the police 30 minutes to come out to respond to that 911 call. And in my opinion, that's unacceptable. But separately, the fact that these young people who are our neighbors, are our friends, they play in front of my house and they grow older, and because there hasn't been anything to do for the last year and a half, gang life has become much more attractive. The lifestyle in which people are able to get into trouble has become more attractive. Our recreation centers have been closed for the last year and a half. And even before the pandemic, most of our recreation centers, at least on my side of town, they offer football and basketball, but not every kid wants to play sports. Right. I want to make sure we have arts programming and If a kid wants to learn how to tinker with the engine, they should be able to go to our rec centers and learn that. And these should be a center for after-school programs and also even adult learning programs. They do it in Cleveland, Ohio. They do it in Washington, D.C. We should be able to do it here in Atlanta. So this is all to say that public safety is important, but public safety is also more than just policing. I recognize that there is a conversation around, we got to hire more cops, but I walk outside, I walk to the store, and I see, APD, but I also see MARTA police. I also see Georgia State University police. I see Fulton County Sheriff's Office. I see Georgia State Patrol, all driving up and down my city. And so we have to approach public safety much more broadly than just policing. I do want to see a change in the culture of policing that happens in this city. I want to see more officers walking our neighborhoods, talking to residents, getting to know people, building relationships. It was what I was taught to do when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. Took my helmet off, took off my sunglasses. I even taught myself to read and write Arabic because I wanted to build a relationship with the people I was trying to protect. But I don't see anything like that from our police officers. They sit behind their cruisers, driving 60 miles an hour down our local streets, don't talk to anybody, don't build relationships. And I think that's negatively impacted our ability to have safe communities because they're not building any relationships, they're not building any intelligence. And so how are you going to know what's happening if you don't communicate with the people you're supposed to protect?
How do we change that? Because we hear a lot about community policing, but how do you actually implement it? Is it a new police chief? Is it a new recruiting model? How do you get there?
Yeah. I think it's all of the above. I think change definitely needs to happen at the top. Not necessarily saying we have to say that we have to fire a police chief, but what I would love to see is us as a city to establish a Department of Public Safety. I think about the fact that we used to have a commissioner of public safety in the city of Atlanta. It doesn't have to be a police officer at the top of the food chain thinking about public safety in Atlanta. And in fact, I think when we have a police officer who's been in the force for 20, 30, 40 years, they're culturally, that is what they know. That's all they know. And it's hard to lead reform or accountability efforts when you have somebody who has been in the system for that long. I would love to see a quote unquote civilian at the top. And I say quote unquote because in my opinion, police officers are civilians too. They may carry a badge and a gun, but they're not in the military. And even though they go out with these military mine-resistant vehicles sometimes, we got to change that culture as well. But you have to have somebody who's going to think more holistically about policing in this city. And that means thinking about how do we encourage more police diversions or arrest diversions instead of arrest themselves. We have to make it so that arrests aren't incentivized as part of an officer's promotion process. You know, officers have the ability to work off duty when you think about bars and clubs and restaurants, based on their arrest numbers, their arrest statistics, their opportunities to be promoted change based on how many people they've arrested. So we have to change that culture, and we have to make it so that that's less of a part of how we do policing in the city.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to talk about is zoning. There's been a lot of talk about changing the zoning codes here in Atlanta so that we can have more housing options. So more duplexes, more triplexes, more 4 or 5 unit apartment buildings, so people can actually afford to live in the city without having to buy or rent a full-blown house. But there has been a lot of pushback. People think it will change the character of their neighborhoods. People think it will cause more traffic. Where do you stand on this? Do you support zoning changes in Atlanta?
Yeah, I support it. And I support it because we used to build that in Atlanta with no issues until about 40 or 50 years ago. And then at some point, city council say, you know what, we want to ban it for whatever reason. I think about the fact that a lot of our communities, a lot of our historic communities have duplexes or triplexes. A new family buys it, turns it into a single family home. If I bought that property and I wanted to turn it back to a duplex or a triplex, then I don't have any way to do that by right. I would have to get a variance or go through the community association to make that happen. So that's all this is doing. It's just saying we're just taking things back to the way it used to be so we can get density that makes sense for our communities. I'm reminded by the fact that West End had 20,000 people living in it in 1970. Today, only 5,000 people live in West End proper. And so it shows you kind of how much density we've lost over the years. And it's not like when you see a duplex or a triplex in a community that it changes the character of the neighborhood. I think about some of our communities on the east side of town in Virginia Highlands or in Midtown or in Inman Park. You have these communities where it's a single family home next to a duplex, next to a 6-unit apartment building, next to a single family home. And those are desirable communities. Those are communities that property values have gone up. Those are communities that have a lot of commercial. And those are the things that we want to see in our communities in Southwest Atlanta. But when we talk about, tweaking the zoning code to allow for diversity of uses, people push back. But I say, I think that it's not going to negatively disrupt our communities. In fact, I believe it's going to enhance our communities. I believe in this idea of neighbors for more neighbors. Getting more people in our communities gets us the businesses and the infrastructure that we've been desiring. But we can't do it when we have huge swaths of vacant land all over the place.
Yeah. Pushing back a little bit on that, though, let's say the zoning codes do change. I think Amir Faroki is trying to push it through council now. If we do end up with more duplexes, more backyard rental properties, more small apartment buildings, does that actually fix displacement, or will we just have more people from upper economic status coming in and taking up these units, especially with big tech companies like Microsoft coming into the communities now.
Yeah, I think it will if you build enough housing units. The problem is that we're building housing units at too slow of a pace. So the people who do move into those types of complexes are the tech types, are the quote unquote yuppies. They're the folks who have the means to be able to buy or rent a expensive condo or apartment in desirable communities. If we build more housing at a rate that we're supposed to be building, then rents won't go up at the rate that they're currently going. People look at as kind of the model of this is Tokyo. Tokyo builds housing at an extremely rapid rate, and their rents have not gone up in the same way that they've done in other big metro areas, whether it's the Bay Area or New York or London or Berlin. Tokyo has weathered the storm. Their rents have only increased 5 to 10% over the last 10 to 15 years versus here in the city of Atlanta, rents have doubled for a lot of families. And so, but
you're saying there's more units available and it's not a rush for everyone to get in. It'll be easier for people who have been in the community for a while to find places.
Correct. And let me kind of peel that back a little bit. So the reason why housing costs are so high is because there's a housing shortage, which means that people are bidding up prices to get into these desirable communities. And so if I'm a legacy resident, I want to stay in my community. If I'm a tech bro who works at Microsoft and I want to live near the Beltline, I want to live in that same community as well. If I'm a Morehouse or Spelman or Clark University graduate and I want to live in the West End, I'm also wanting to live in that community. So we're all competing for a very limited stock of housing. But if we build more housing, then we can accommodate more people, and it makes it. And then because you have more housing that's built, that demand curve goes down, that supply curve goes up, and so costs go down. And we've seen that happen in communities, not in the city of Atlanta necessarily, but in other communities across the country. It's not going to solve it, but it will put a dent in it.
Yeah, gotcha. Mr. Dozier, real quick, can you please tell our listeners where District 4 is in Atlanta?
Yeah, District 4 is essentially central southwest Atlanta. It's kind of how I describe it. Everything between 5 Points and Fort McPherson. So you have my home community, Mechanicsville. You have parts of South Downtown and Castleberry Hill, but you also have West End, the Atlanta University Center, Oakland City, and Venetian Hills, Mosley Park, and Asheville Heights.
Thank you. And where can our listeners keep up with you and your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of my social media handles are at Vote Jason Dozier on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And my website is votedozier.com. It's not only my website, but it's a call to action. And so if you have any questions about me, where my background is, visit us there. My personal phone number is on there as well. I tell people, call me. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your ideas are, because I want people to know that I'm going to be as accessible as I am today if elected. I believe accountability requires accessibility. So I'm not going to be hiding. I'm not going to be a shrinking violet. I'm going to be available and accessible to anybody who reaches out to me.
Gotcha. Well, Jason, thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck on the rest of the campaign.
All right. Thank you.